Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, we're talking about building a global nonprofit, not something you hear about all that often, but I'm excited to dive in with our guest today, Cathlene Miner. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you, and thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So this is it's a definitely unique conversation. You definitely hear about nonprofits a lot and people who start nonprofits, but you made that jump of going global. So first and foremost, tell me about Hopeful Handbags and where does the story begin?
So the story begins, my mom grew up in a very abusive home, and she had lots of siblings. She was in the middle, but a very caregiving personality. That's my mom. So we lived across the street from my grandparents. I remember this at being like 4 and 5 years old. And so she had siblings that are mine and my sister's age. And they would come running across the street, Debbie, and mom would go run over, send her siblings back to us. And we'd be standing there at the fence. And I remember just thinking, this isn't normal because I don't live this way here at this house. Something's going on here. And I always knew and could see that somebody was hurt. And there was always a lot of yelling. So it just stuck with me. And I always wondered, why did my grandmother stay? Like, why did she stay as I got older? And so I raised my kids, and this was something that was always on my mind. And I just need to put in there, like, my grandmother passed away at a very young age. So it's about 35 years ago now. And I think she was in her early 50s, because you can only get hit so many times, right? It was a brain injury. And so I wanted to find out why people stay. So I went and got certified to be a domestic abuse advocate. And the first thing I learned was there is no one reason why people stay. Every situation is different. They are similar on the outside, from the outside looking in, but it's not the same. Everything is different as far as personalities. But the one thing that's always in common is power and control. That's what an abuser has, whether it's physical, mental, financial, whatever it is, it's power and control. So my grandmother always loved her handbag. She'd always hold it next to her. No matter where she went, she had that handbag. And there was a point where all the money was gone because, my grandmother was losing the money. And so we would take her shopping to JCPenney's. So those of you that know about JCPenney's or they're at my age, like, it was really cool. We were at JCPenney's a lot. And we would take her there like every 6 months. And I just remember taking her there and her picking out her bag. So I always thought, who would my grandmother reach out to if she knew that there could have been help, with no judgment at all? Like, okay, whatever you tell me, I'm not going to be surprised, but where are you? And we're moving forward. Now, this was a long time ago, right? Things were still kind of hidden behind closed doors. Whatever's there stays there type things. Things are a little different now. So what I did was I put out a post about collecting handbags that could be filled with necessities so that we could start raising hope to survivors of domestic abuse and their children. Because when you see a parent, now statistically it's women, but this does happen to men too. We do have man bags. When you see a parent smile, especially after they've been through so much, it also lifts the kids up too, right? It gives them a sense of relief even if it's a short amount of time. So I started having a big influx of people just in my town. I live in Northeast Florida, saying, hey, I've got some handbags. I saw your post. I've got some necessities. Can I leave them on your porch? Perfect. So they did that. Then it started to get pretty large. So I turned it into a nonprofit, and it started there. So the base of what we do is still the handbags that we fill with necessities to raise hope. But from there, we started to understand the needs that are unique in every situation for survivors and their children. So our mission, if you look at the site that you've seen, says safety, health, wellness, happiness, and long-term financial stability. So anything that we can do that will lead to that end goal of long-term financial stability is what we help people with. Now, That's a huge range of stuff. So it's not like we have a list of, oh, we do this, 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 and this. Now, the necessities that go in the handbag, we've been told they pull those out. It's like, oh, this isn't just shampoo. This is hope. This is self-esteem. This is self-confidence. And each bag has a note inside that's handwritten from our volunteers and a tag that goes in the bag. So that's the local area where I was. I am still here, but that's all it was. Then we started getting contacts and people reaching out to us from other countries and saying, this is a huge issue. Like, what can I do over here to help the people here? So we collaborated officially with an organization whom I become almost like sisters with the founder. It's called Moms in Business International. And she has the largest all women's networking group in the world. And we collaborated with her. And so then we started helping people in her organization. So they started speaking out and saying, whoa, I'm in this situation and I don't know what to do. And so this is how the snowball effect really started. Then we became, okay, we got people who want to be the president of Hopeful Handbags in their country. So then we officially register, right? Some countries it's an NGO, some countries it's a charity, some countries it's a nonprofit. All the same thing, just depends on what country you're going into. And it's not hard to do. Like my husband likes to say, it's just a paperwork play, right? Like you got to put in the paperwork and then they send it back and say, you got to do this. And then you send in more paperwork and they say, it's a back and forth like that. But I had somebody ask me one time, like, so you just decided you wanted to do it globally. Like, how did it work? And I was like, you know what? I just set my mind to it. I was like, there's no reason why this can't happen. I mean, there's global organizations everywhere. Like, it's not a question of, can it happen? It's let's do this and let's just make it happen. So that's kind of a synopsis, like a broad overview of the organization itself. But yeah, every day there's things that go on. We've had to grow teams in other areas, right? Because I can't do everything. So there's a president, a vice president, or if it's an NGO, for instance, it has to be a chair and a secretary. And you learn all these things I've learned that I was a stay-at-home mom for over 20 years. Now, if you would have told me that I was going to be running a global nonprofit when I was homeschooling my two younger children and doing other than like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now, but we'll see what happens, kind of a thing. So yeah, that's a broad overview of it. I mean, it's such an honor, the people that I have met and the people that we help.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say it was a broad overview. You went from idea to global nonprofit in like 5 minutes. So there's like a million questions to unpack this.
Right.
And I'm sure you skipped some details along the way. But when you were, in the beginning, when it was just an idea and it was a Facebook post, what was that transition like to actually creating the nonprofit, but then growing the team? I assume you had to grow a team stateside prior to going international. What are some of those road bumps that you experience along the way that, anybody who grows any business, for-profit, nonprofit, I mean, there are hiccups to growing a team. So what was your journey there?
Yeah, there definitely are. And so we decided to do it. And I say we, because I was talking to my husband and my mom. My mom's a big part of the organization. And, people want tax write-offs. You can get more donations with tax write-offs. Let's just be real. And you have to be a real 501c3 within the United States to get so that people can use it as a tax write-off. So that was one of the main reasons why I went ahead and started that part of it, because businesses were starting to ask questions. Can I be a drop-off location? And that's another thing, that's how we got businesses involved, is we said, you know what, you can be an official drop-off location. We will advertise that you're a drop-off location in this area so that when people have handbags and necessities, they will go to your business, which they may not have known about before. Perfect. And that's one thing that we did. Roadblocks, I would say paperwork was a lot of a roadblock, right? Because they want this and they want that, and you want it done yesterday, and it takes about 6 months, 8 months, depending, right? That was a little bit of a back and forth for that. The team at first was amazing. And I'm not saying it wasn't all along, but when you start to get a lot of people together we want different ideas. and you want people to say what's on their mind, but everybody still has to have the core foundation of the mission in mind. And that doesn't always happen when your team gets really big. So you do have to go through a weeding out process as time goes on. I found that for me to be a little bit uncomfortable in this setting. Back in a previous, I like to say a previous life, before I became a stay-at-home mom, I was a supervisor at the Mayo Clinic. So I was used to having 30 to 50 employees and sometimes having to let people go and whatever. But for whatever reason, in this atmosphere of a nonprofit, when you're really seeing the lives you're impacting, it was a little more personal to me. So it was a little harder to do that at some point. So I personally found that as a huge roadblock because I didn't like doing it. But we also, to grow the business, a nonprofit is a business, right? You got to run it as a business. Everybody's got to be on the team. Yeah, you have to be team players. If somebody's an odd one out, meaning that they're always saying that something's not going to work, or they're a negative Nelly, as I like to call them, we don't do negative Nellies. Like, we just don't. If you're a negative Nelly, you can't be a part of the team. Now, if you have another idea and we want to go straight on with it and figure it out, that's great. But we don't do negative Nellies. So that's one thing too about having your own business or nonprofit that I think you can really build on if you have that as one of your base missions too. Because when somebody starts to really rock the boat, not that you're going to get rid of somebody right away, maybe, but maybe you do. Because you're like, as much of a great person as you are, this isn't a good fit. It's got to be a good fit. So I found that to be it wasn't a roadblock. I worked right through the roadblock, right? We just hopped over the hurdle and kept moving. But that's something that we did. And then as we started to grow the team, people started coming forward to where then, okay, where do they belong on the team? Do they belong as an executive board member? Do they belong in a like kind of tier it here or on a project that we're working on, right? Where they're not exactly a part of the executive board, but they're still part of the main part of Hopeful Handbags, right? And then you have the volunteers, which they're still part of that. Now, I will say at this point, we are still 100% a volunteer organization. And that's something that, I'm not saying we don't pay people for anything because, we run Google ads. We have to have an outside third party do that. We have an accountant. We have, all these things that we have to do, websites, stuff like that we do have to pay. But as far as our actual work on the ground goes, they're volunteers. And it has really been just heart-filling to see where everything goes with that. So yeah, then we started growing globally. And so once we start doing work in a different country, we do the work without the official certification yet. So basically the way we run it is the United States, we put together. So if when we started in Ireland, for instance, okay, people in Ireland are getting involved, then, okay, they're donating the money. That goes into a little section for Ireland so that everybody knows that's going back to Ireland. That's going back to Ireland. And so then when they become official, this is just a good example of how our process works. And they get their official bank account. You can't open the official bank account for the charity, nonprofit, or NGO until you're officially certified and registered. Then we can start doing that. So there's been things along the way that we've learned that has made it easier as we go into each country, even though they're different culturally. Now we just became official in Kenya about 3 months ago. And so that was a whole nother process, right? You're dealing with not only a whole different government, but a whole different culture in that area. So, and in that country too, things are a little bit different as far as where the needs are for our survivors and their children. And when we talk about children, we also talk about children of child abuse. And that's, that hits home for me because that's where my mom grew up, being abused. And luckily for me and my sister and I, my mom did a 180. She met my dad, and literally he's the one that changed her life. And I do believe that if the right person comes into your life, it can't just be anybody. The right person comes into your life, they can totally change your life. And my mom, she had me when she was 15 and my dad was 17. and they're still together. They are the most amazing couple. Seriously, I just can't say enough good about them. But they also have been a part of the organization to where if I need something, my dad's a great handy guy. By tomorrow I'll have it built if it's something I need here, right? My mom, it has to do with volunteers. She's on it. It's done. And I do think you have to have people on your team that are like that, whether they're family members or they're just somebody that you really trust 110%. And not only to get the things done, but to give you honest feedback. Because you know what, to hurt my feelings, I don't care, because it's not going to hurt my feelings. Like, I really need to know what you think about this. And then as your team grows, what I've found, and even in these other countries, is you get that same relationship with those people. And so it's not oh gosh, I can't believe they said that. It's okay, cool. Now, where do we go from here? How do we fix this? Or how do we have to shift everything to make this work? And I think being open-minded is really important. And even though I started the nonprofit, I don't think of myself as being any different than every single other person on our board, in our groups, or our volunteers. I don't think of anybody any different, because we're all part of one big team. And I think for me, that mentality has changed everything, which I think, like I said, I was full-time supervisor in a medical facility. And while you want to think of everybody that way, it's not thought of that way in most corporate environments. Although I think it should be, for the most part, at least personality-wise, right? Because you got to still get along. If you've got and yeah, you're going to have a hierarchy because somebody's been there longer. They have more experience. They have this is what they're good at. And that has to be done. But I think as far as like the team coming together and really working together on things, I mean, that makes all the difference in success, I feel like.
I agree. Quite frankly, that's our mission at Human Up, and we've done that in so many different companies to eliminate the hierarchy and the perception of people being less than or more than. It's people all have different skill sets, and we need to leverage them for our success. I think one of the things that you're highlighting here I always find so fascinating about nonprofits, and it doesn't get pulled over into the for-profit world enough, but I mean, we've advocated for it with every single client we've consulted for, is being mission driven. And you said it so many times, saying it specifically, you said it without saying it. And that's where, when you recruit honest feedback from people and you don't get offended, it's because you're all there to serve the mission, which is exactly what it should be. Every business, for-profit, nonprofit, government, I mean, that's a different battle to tackle.
We could really talk a long time about that. That would be fun, but go ahead.
We could. That would be like 4 more podcasts, and we probably get canceled at some point as well. Right. But that's what it comes down to, is in order to make a difference in the world, in order to have a successful business of any kind, everybody needs to put ego aside and say, we are here for the mission. We need to serve the mission. If we're not doing that, we either need to make a change or someone's got to leave.
Right.
And that's what you've hit on. That to me was the big takeaway from this episode. That's why you've been able to grow to 4 countries and in the United States as well. So very cool story.
Thank you. And yeah, so we are in now, I'll just run through them because we're in more than 4 countries. We're just in the middle of registration in some. The United States, the Caribbean, all the islands in the Caribbean, Northern Ireland, Canada, the United Kingdom, and then we do some work over in Australia.
And Kenya.
In Kenya. Oh, yep. Forgot Kenya. That's an official one. And like in Kenya too, we could talk about for a while, but the mission, their needs over there are different. How they're going to make money is not fill out a resume, go on Indeed and see who's hiring. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen. So we had to come up with very creative ways to not only sustain people long-term, but the kids and the community. And it had to start with health. It had to start with sanitation and water. That's what we had to start with. And so that's what we did. So now we put water tanks in. We just put our 17th water tank in a rural area in Kenya, just launched it on Friday. So, and we don't send us over there. That's another thing I really pride ourselves on. Number one, let me just say this really quick. I know I talked to you about this before, but Any money that's donated stays within the area it's donated. Same with in-kind donations, unless something's earmarked. If you're donating to a water tank in Kenya, it's going to go to the water tank in Kenya, no matter where you are, right? But other than that, or other projects in other countries. If not, it stays there. And I think that's really important. And also, we don't send people over to Kenya to put water tanks in. The people there put the water tanks in, and then they have volunteers that help within their communities, which then we teach how to do plumbing, how to put water tanks in, how to do spigots, how to do all of this stuff. And then they can go on, now they know a trade, and they can get a job. So that's how we're extending the progress of how do we take a couple of people. So when we counted up the numbers, even in Kenya, the amount of people that we've helped with these water tanks is 70,000. Because they're not just for the schools. The communities have access, and now we're working on sanitation. But that's totally different than what I'm doing in the United States, where I'm going to help, we're moving survivors and their child into a safe location. And then we're making sure they have a job, and then we're figuring out how they're going to get transportation and a car. And that's the process, right? But we started this in 2017, or I started in 2017, and I'm just blown away by the good heartedness of people. People have a good heart. And when you surround yourself with people like that, more people surround you with good hearts. So there you go. I mean, that's how I'm talking to you today. If you didn't have a good heart, we probably wouldn't have connected in whatever way.
That is true. That's absolutely true. I love it. And yeah, no negative Nellies.
No negative Nellies. They got to go. Sorry. It has to. If you want to, you got to make that choice. You got to make that choice. Am I staying stuck or moving on? Because the other thing to look at, the way I started looking at it, was that person's not in the right place either yet. Like there's something else for them. They're still growing. So you're doing them a favor too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Cathlene, I love this story. I love what you're up to. And there's so much more to dive into that we don't have time to in the short timeline that we have on this show. But if the listeners want to learn more, they want to find out how they can get involved, I'll put the website on the screen, but tell us a little bit about where to find you and what you're up to.
So if you go to CathleenMiner.com, that's my personal website. However, I'm putting you there because you can click on to Hopeful Handbags. You can click on to ZZ Adam, which is a blogging site that I run and own. But you can find everything there, or you can even message me and ask me a question, and I can go from there.
I love it. Cathlene, thank you so much for being here. Your story is inspiring.
Thank you for having me.
Wherever you're watching, listening, the links are down below. Go check it out. CathleenMiner.com. Links to everything else. We'll see you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmonious at Lunch podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we want to invite you to join us in the Small Business Success Facebook group, our private group where guests and listeners come together to grow your business. We want impact-driven entrepreneurs who are ready to go to the next level in this group so we can all share ideas, collaborate, and grow our businesses together. Go to whatif.com/group, and we want to invite you to join today. See you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.